Introduction. Abraham Lincoln is one of the most important presidents in American history. He led the United States during the Civil War when the northern and southern states fought to decide the future of the country. He is known as the Great Emancipator because his actions freed enslaved people across the South. After the war, the United States became one nation again and has remained so ever since. Abraham Lincoln is often pictured as tall, lanky, and solemn. He is remembered as a common man with little regular schooling who was born in a log cabin in Kentucky. Yet he became a great lawyer, speaker, and political leader. His speeches about freedom, justice, and uniting all Americans are carved in stone at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. His belief was simple. As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. The early years. Abraham Lincoln was born to Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln on February 12, 1809, on a small log cabin farm near Hodgenville, Kentucky. After moving to nearby Knob Creek, Abe and his older sister Sarah went to school for short periods during the winters. When Abe was 7, the family moved to Indiana, hoping for a better life. 2 years after Tom built a new log cabin, Nancy became ill and died. Abe and Sarah mourned the death of their hard-working, loving mother. Soon after, Abe's father married Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow and mother of 3, whom Tom had known in Kentucky. With love and care, she created a warm life for Abe and Sarah. She encouraged Abe as he grew into a tall, awkward youth. Friends spoke of his moody quietness, even though Abe told homey, humorous stories. Abe educated himself mainly by borrowing books and newspapers from neighbors and travelers. Stories of pioneers such as Daniel Boone and Johnny Appleseed, along with the books Abe read, sparked ideas of a world larger than his backwoods. As a teenager, Abe, now standing 6 feet 4 inches, 2 meters, traveled down the Mississippi River to the busy port of New Orleans. For the first time, he saw black men, women, and children held in chains to be bought and sold by white enslavers. At the age of 22, Abe moved to New Salem, Illinois. He worked different jobs, including storekeeper, land surveyor, and builder. He became well known as a wrestler and as a skilled speaker in the New Salem Debating Society. He ran for the Illinois State Legislature and lost in 1832, but he won 2 years later. A lawyer and fellow legislator, John Todd Stewart, encouraged Abe to study law. Abe read law books, passed the exams in March 1837, and joined Stewart's law practice. He moved to Springfield, where the Illinois legislature met. Law and politics. Abraham Lincoln's views were based on his strong belief that each person was important, regardless of wealth or privilege. He became a respected member of the Whig Party, which supported strong central government in Washington, D.C. The other leading party, the Democrats, believed that states should control their own affairs. At the age of 30, Lincoln met his future wife, Mary Ann Todd. They married 3 years later in 1842, and a year after that, their first son, Robert, was born. When Robert was a toddler, Lincoln won the election for Illinois representative to the U.S. Congress and moved to Washington, D.C. with his family. Lincoln was in Congress as the northern and southern states became more divided over the issue of slavery. The North depended on paid laborers in its factories and small farms, and believed in a strong central government. Slavery was outlawed in the northern states. The South depended on king cotton, grown on large plantations, and used the labor of enslaved people who were owned as property. Most of them lived under very poor conditions. They had no personal or civil rights. The laws of southern states allowed and protected slavery. As the United States expanded, Western territories asked for statehood. Would these states enter as free or slave states? Lincoln opposed slavery, As an Illinois representative in Washington, he believed that state laws in the South protected slavery. However, he fought the spread of slavery in the Western territories. Lincoln returned to Springfield after 2 years in Washington, and for the next few years shared a successful law practice with his partner, William Herndon. Lincoln became known for his honesty, legal skills, wit, and fine speeches. America divided. Meanwhile, the pro- and anti-slavery forces struggled for power. Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854. The new law allowed the residents of each territory to decide whether they wanted to be free or slave states. Lincoln decided it was time to speak out against the spread of slavery and to try again for political office. He joined the new Republican Party, which opposed slavery. He was nominated in 1858 as their candidate for senator. His opponent was Senator Stephen Douglas. During the campaign, they held the Lincoln-Douglas debates, which captured the attention of the country. Lincoln argued that black people had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just like white people. Douglas said that the Constitution guaranteed equality only to white people. Each state, he believed, had the right to decide whether it would be slave or free. Lincoln declared that slavery was causing a national crisis. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure, permanently half slave and half free. Lincoln lost the Senate election, but the debates made him popular, especially in the Republican Party. By 1860, he was the party's choice for U.S. president. During his campaign, he was called Honest Abe, the homespun man of the people who stood for equality and freedom. That November, he won the election. The North and the Western territories rejoiced. The South was outraged. Even before Lincoln's inauguration, 7 Southern states voted to secede from the United States of America. The pro-slavery states established a government called the Confederate States of America, and its leader, President Jefferson Davis, prepared the Confederate States for war. The war years. President Lincoln hoped to avoid war, but events moved quickly. By April 14th, Northern troops had surrendered Fort Sumter after South Carolina cannons fired on the fort. Both the Union and the Confederacy moved quickly to call volunteers and collect arms and supplies. The South's better military leadership defeated Union forces in the first battle at Bull Run. Lincoln struggled to find strong leaders for the Union troops throughout the war. Under General George B. McClellan, the Union troops had some successes, but by 1862, they were stopped by Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Union forces controlled New Orleans and the Mississippi River, but there were few victories. Lincoln took over more of the military planning as the North called for action. Great numbers of young soldiers on both sides were killed, wounded, or missing as the war continued into its second year. The Union lost the Second Battle of Bull Run, and at Antietam, both sides suffered the bloodiest battle of the war. Powerful Republican senators urged President Lincoln to make the abolition of slavery a war goal. They argued that to fight the war successfully, the Union needed to remove the issue that caused the war. Lincoln was finally convinced that as president, he could order abolition in the South. On January 1, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, which freed all enslaved people in the Confederacy. Although free black men had rushed to enlist in the Union Army after Fort Sumter, they were initially turned away. Now they, along with newly freed men from the South, joined Union forces. By the end of the Civil War, nearly 200,000 black men had served as soldiers in the U.S. military. Freedom for some. The Emancipation Proclamation freed many enslaved people, but not all of them. On the first day of January 1863, it granted freedom to all enslaved people in enemy territory. This allowed newly freed black men in Confederate areas to fight for the Union, soldiers whom the North badly needed. It also redefined the war by making it a crusade against slavery. Yet the proclamation did not pertain to enslaved people in the border states of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri. Why not? These border states, though slaveholding, never seceded from the Union. Lincoln was concerned that freeing enslaved people in these states would persuade the states to join the Confederacy. If that happened, the United States would almost certainly lose the war, lose the South, and lose its chance to end slavery in all states. The country's remaining enslaved people would have to wait 2 more years to be free. Another oppressed people. Although Lincoln is widely regarded as the great emancipator, his legacy with many Native peoples is less positive. He served as president during a time of great westward expansion, and his policies harmed the Native peoples that already lived in those places. The construction of the Transcontinental Railroad forced many of them onto reservations. It led to their loss of land, natural resources, and entire way of life. The summer of 1863 brought victory to Union forces at Gettysburg, which was a turning point in the war. President Lincoln, while dedicating a cemetery to the many soldiers who had died, delivered his famous Gettysburg Address. The speech lasted only 2 minutes, yet it is remembered for its simple beauty and eloquence. Lincoln spoke of the war as a test of whether the nation could survive as a democracy. He challenged those still alive to complete the unfinished work of those who had died. He challenged them to make sure that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Under General Ulysses S. Grant, the Union troops won victories in the West and South. Lincoln saw hope of the war's end as Confederate troops were defeated in Georgia and Virginia in late 1864. He was re-elected president and, in early 1865, cheered Congress passing the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which outlawed slavery in the United States. The war lasted 4 years and cost 600,000 lives. The Union survived, and slavery was abolished. But only 6 days after the end of the war, President Abraham Lincoln lay dead from an assassin's bullet. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate supporter, shot Lincoln while he attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. As Lincoln's body was carried back to his beloved Illinois on a funeral train, mourners silently saluted this great American hero.